Hello, friends. We continue now with the 6 stages of discipleship, and we have a little segue into the 5th stage, which is an advanced stage, Shela within the aura. So many people now would consider it a high attainment to achieve even accepted discipleship. But beyond that lies the rather psychic stage of Chela on the thread, and then the 5th stage, Chela in the aura. So a little bridge here says that the law of positive and negative relationships underlies all these stages. That which is higher is at first always negative to that which is lower. We don't yet manage to work in the higher point of tension, and the lower of the related points of tension seems to take a preference or takes the emphasis. Then interim changes take place, which make the higher positive to the lower and lead, therefore, to the steady ascending of the way of life and the ladder of spiritual ascent. Well, that's what we are attempting to do as we work with the Tibetan, to climb that ladder of spiritual ascent and even to tread the way of life, which is the way which leads to the monad, and through the monad, beyond, on the way of higher evolution. And basically, it's about the law of positive and negative. He says positive and negative relationships underlie all these stages of discipleship. That which is higher is at first always negative to that which is lower. Well, until we learn how to really contact that which is higher. It takes a while to be able to focus in the higher point of tension or in the higher source. Then interim changes take place which make the higher positive to the lower and lead, therefore, to the steady ascending of the way of life. Now, way of life is actually towards the monad, and it continues on the way of higher evolution. So steady ascending on the ladder of spiritual ascent occurs. On this ladder of spiritual ascent, we have to establish each stage with some degree of certainty, so that the whole thing does not collapse. So all of us have to go through the same thing. We will establish the point of tension at which we find ourselves with some degree of certainty, and then gradually make our way ascending into a higher source, a higher point of tension, which then directs what is lower. Now, this takes us, as I said, to the end of program 19, and it took us to page 749. So that was the segue, and we're dealing now with the chela within the aura. The definition is given. I've already highlighted all this, so that will eliminate some of the time that otherwise would be taken. The stage wherein he, the disciple, is permitted to know the method whereby he may set up, and there's an ellipsis there, so we don't exactly know what that ellipsis contains, where he may set up a call which will entitle him to an interview with the master. At this stage, the disciple is called a chela within the aura. Now, if we think about it, already the possibility of reaching the master for some access of his energy was established with chela on the thread. And the disciple in that earlier stage was trusted that he would not set up a call in any personal emergency. But it would have to be an emergency that related to the larger work. Well, then how much more is that the case here, where the disciple is actually requesting an interview with the master, which certainly would take much more time and attention, and then definitely has to be for some larger and definite purpose. But one thing about this stage is that if anybody is admitted to it, they are trusted to be able to discriminate between personal need and group need, and finally, the need of humanity itself. So it's a pretty safe bet that there will not be a misuse of this kind of prerogative, entitlement, privilege, that the initiate disciple now possesses. I'm just thinking here, obviously I'm saying some different things. And I'm trying to think, some of you will be receiving the audio transcript where on this side, my words and the Tibetan's words are both listed. I hate to make this complicated, but I'm not about to do the entire program over again, because there are still 2 hours and about 2 hours and a half, roughly, which are pretty good. I tested them out, and I hope that none of the programs that I have sent you have this kind of recording flaw. So if they do, please let me know, and I shall, with chagrin, have to do them over again, or at least certain sections. Now, DK goes on to say that it is a stage of discipleship which is far in advance of that attained by most disciples. They are rather aiming for this stage we call accepted discipleship. That is the most common objective. And why is this so far ahead of most disciples? Is that it connotes almost complete at-one-ment between the disciple and the master's group. He does use the word almost. So he has synchronized himself with the disciples and with the master. There's a lot more to the word synchronization than the idea of rhythm and time. It has to do, let's call it with a qualitative synchronization as well. So by now, the initiate disciple, because that is what he is very close to the master and to the more inner ashram. He has already been accorded the privilege of invoking the attention of the master in times of emergency, but not personal emergency, in times of group emergency or the emergency of humanity. And that was accomplished in the psychic stage that we call a chela on the thread. And he has advanced from the point when he was being trained to become an integrated and useful unit in the ashram to where he is now, at least, a trusted agent. An agent is one who represents the ashram. So at first, he may not be integrated at all and be a point of disturbance or difficulty, as the case may be. But there is advancement in this question of trust, because somehow he proves himself and he, learning the ropes, so to speak, produces less and less disturbance. His orientation is not fixed, is now fixed. And let's just say, what can I do here? Okay, now fixed. And what I'll do is make this a whole lot smaller. And I'll change the color. His orientation is now fixed and whoop. And not fluctuating. Fluctuation is one of the major problems in approach to ashramic life. One becomes a type of light which is seen waxing and waning because of approach and retraction. So his orientation is now fixed, and though he is subjected to many tests and difficulties, these are increasingly concerned with group life and condition, and not with himself. The ability to handle one's own personal problems has gone on sufficiently long to assure the master that the approaching disciple is capable of handling those non-ashramic personal matters by himself. I refer not here, he says, to the difficulties of any ashramic group or to those connected with any group affiliation he may rightly hold upon the physical plane, but to his responsiveness to the group need of humanity. That's how widely he is now thinking, not just of himself, and not even of that relatively smaller unit called the ashram, and especially the externalized ashram, the people he knows on the outer plane who are also members of the inner plane. Responsiveness to the group need of humanity. It's a broad consideration, and I wonder how many of us do think in those terms. Where this it's a broader consideration than will even be expected of the accepted disciple or of the chela in the light, or rather the chela on the thread. Where this responsiveness exists, it means that the whole is of greater importance to him than the part. Now think of it in your own life. Truly, truly, truly. Is the whole of greater importance to you than the part? If you think about the sign Cancer with the related constellations of Argo and the little sheep pen, an ashram, and the greater sheep pen, then we will understand how wholeness grows in the sign Cancer, which has two of these external non-zodiacal constellations related to the constellation and hence the sign Cancer. So the whole humanity, let us say, that is one of the words used in relation to the phrase in Cancer, the whole is seen as one, humanity. The whole is of greater importance to him than the part. Now we really must somehow we must arrange that be our prevailing attitude. This in no way negates his ability to work with individuals or to give understanding love and compassion to those in his path that he encounters, yes, in his path of life who need it. That's the amazing thing for these initiate disciples. They can think in very big terms, but they can also focus right down to the immediate need of those whom they may encounter. But he has arrived at a sense of right proportion. It's all part of harmlessness, right? It's correct proportion and completed point of view and divine understanding. He has seen what is big, what is little, and he can relate the two without dichotomizing the two. So he has arrived at a sense of right proportion and of correct organization of his life processes, trends, and activities in time and space. The hierarchy is the society of organized and illumined minds. We can certainly see that both of those characteristics in Master Decay. His mind is highly organized, and he presents that organization to us so frequently in outline form, and he's filled with light. So at first, we don't have this correct organization of what's going on in our life. And then, should we actually have it, then he can be depended upon always to substitute the good of the whole for the individual good, without, of course, being cruel or somehow dismissive of the individual. The whole is seen as one. But there is no my soul or thy soul, only the soul. And that unitive sense does not immediately come upon us. So he has to be depended upon and can be depended upon to know the good of the whole, and also what is deemed by the personality to be individual good. He's moving all the time, ever closer to the hierarchy, ever more interiorly related to the inner subsidiary ashram, and finally, as a member there, to the ashram considered as a whole. There are many mysteries about this, and I think only as we actually experience them will we be in a position to know the truth of these subtle perceptions? And will our attitude change? It becomes, doesn't it, an impersonal attitude, even a trans individual attitude. It becomes an attitude which embraces the, well, humanity as a whole, And because it does, we find the initiate disciple moving ever closer to the heart of the ashram. Now, let's see how much, a little bit more. Huh? Basically, I've done my pantomime bit, which is so frustrating because I felt everything was very clear and that it was working. Now I simply hope that quite a number of these programs have worked. If you find, as I say, a program where I'm doing the pantomime bit, just let me know. I've got to know. There are just too many buttons for my fairly non-technical mind. The master knows that in the chela who has reached this stage, he has a dependable instrument, and one that who can be regarded no longer as a drag upon the life of the group. I don't think any one of us wants to be that, but we are shown even in the discussion of the 6th degree that until we have achieved a real mental polarization between the 2nd and 3rd degree, for whatever reason it appears in the 6th degree section, if we, for whatever reason, have not achieved true mental polarization, then we do become a drag upon the life of the group. We become what's called a hazard. But once we pass through the temptations in the desert and have achieved a true mental polarization, and that doesn't just mean mental focus of a good mind, it's something else. It's the mind held steady in the light, and in fact, we will no longer be counted as a hazard. One thing for sure, we don't want to slow the master down. We don't want to slow the ashram down, as DK says, for the unimportant task of the master taking care of the individual chela, who is there noticed as a point of light on the outskirts of the ashram, and we might say also, usually, initially, a point of disturbance. Hard then to avoid the limitations we impose on others simply because of our own state of development. And thus it goes in this battle for democracy at present raging. People are the victim of the limitations of their state of development, and they must be reached as I've said, changing from red to purple to indigo blue, at least the purple. I have, says the Tibetan, pointed out to you, therefore, before this, how difficult is the process of absorbing a new disciple into the ashram. We're liable to think not, that, we have achieved something of value and we believe in it, and there's no reason why our very way of being should cause difficulty. And yet there's so much we don't know about ashramic life, even after we get inducted into it. So let's approach with humility, realizing that, as the Master says, yes, you are my accepted disciple, and even, well, there especially, by the time we reach Sheva on the thread, we've already learned to attune quite a bit to what's really going on within the ashram. But at first, that accepted disciple on the periphery of the ashram is significantly a point of disturbance. He has to be taught to advance gradually. Everything is done in gradation. Otherwise, the ladder won't hold, the steps won't hold, if one is in too much of a hurry. How to advance gradually in a graded manner from the periphery of the group consciousness towards the center. Now, do we have the patience to do that? Or do we want to rush ahead? In certain rituals, that prohibition against rushing ahead is met with a significant symbolic counterforce. A good sense of timing is so very important. And realizing that we've been around forever, not in individual form, but in form of the greater identity, perhaps we can quell the tendency to rush forward. There is no rush, no hurry, and yet there is no time to lose. Each pilgrim, sensing this, presses his footsteps forward until he finds himself surrounded by his fellow men. Some move ahead, he follows after. Some, I guess, I'm not exactly sure here. Some move behind. He sets the pace from the rules of the road. So the centrality that we seek is the centrality of selflessness and of a great care for the welfare of humanity. It's because of the service that we advance. That's what the Master looks for. And until we are deeply engaged in selfless service, there will not be the kind of advancement, privileges, prerogatives that are here discussed in relation to the Chela in the aura. Each step forward necessitates care. on the part of the master in order that the ashram is preserved from all disruptive activity. Later, we'll see that serenity is such an important aspect of this, not so much peace in the lower sense, but serenity. And obviously, if you have a point of disturbance on the periphery of the ashram, well, it's going to take the time and energy of those who have better things to do to straighten all that out. It is only when the chela has achieved, well, here we go, occult serenity, that he can be permitted to focus himself permanently within the group aura and become the chela within the aura. Now here, DK seems to value serenity above peace, although there is a very high form of peace. There is also that peace of pleasantness to the astral body. There is light supernal, love eternal, peaceful, silent will. That's a very high form, but we're talking about, oh, let me be in peace, you know. We're talking about that. So there's a lot about permission, isn't there? No real advancement occurs unless there is permission given. It's not like we can just barge in and say, here I am. So when serenity is substituted for the common understanding of peace, then indeed we can focus ourselves permanently within the group aura. This happens when he becomes our disciple and maybe our initiate disciple. This happens when he becomes conscious of the peculiar and specific vibration of the master's aura. And hence you can see the need for serenity. Otherwise, there's so much commotion going on that there can never be rhythmic synchronization, or, if we can use the word this way, qualitative synchronization. Then you have a similar vibration within the aura, and that similarity blends in harmony and will allow no disturbance. We're getting close to the point where I realized that I still don't know why there was only a pantomime going on. I would point out, says the Tibetan, that serenity and peace are not identical. Kind of modifying a few things here. Serenity and peace are not identical. We're a little bit careless in our language, and we might say, oh, he or she is so peaceful, so serene. But there is a significant occult difference in this case. Peace must ever be temporary, easily disrupted, I guess, and refers to the world of feeling, at least in its lower aspect, and to conditions susceptible of disturbance. Now there is the hint. Conditions susceptible of disturbance. Maybe this is not the case with serenity. Maybe a different attitude is involved. It is essential to progress and an inevitable happening that every step forward is marked by disturbances. And that will certainly be the disruption of peace as normally considered. By points of crisis and chaos, replaced later when successfully handled by periods of peace. So there's disturbance, peace. It is disruptible. But maybe when we talk of peaceful, silent will, it is not disruptible. But this peace is not serenity. So he's going to speak about that which is needed above and beyond the lower point of peace, which is simply and often a comfort to the astral body. And the Chela is only permitted to dwell within the master's aura when serenity has been substituted for peace. We have, the idea of the Christ with a calmness forever unperturbed, as we see coming up. So think about that for a minute. The disciple is only permitted to dwell within the master's aura. What a privilege, of course. And how unlikely that people of our type can immediately do that without going through some pretty drastic self-training here. Only when serenity has been substituted for peace. Now, what about serenity? And here I may have begun to come to that point at the end of some 35 minutes of frustrating pantomime. Serenity signifies that deep calm, devoid of emotional disturbance, which distinguishes the disciple who is focused in a mind held steady in the light. Maybe it's a kind of mindfulness that the Buddhists have. And as I said, of the Christ, it is said that he is possessed by calmness, forever unperturbed. The light allows one to see the reason for the disturbance, for the emotional disturbance, and one can stand back and no longer participate in that emotional disturbance. The surface of his life may be from the worldly angle in a state of violent flux. Maybe we have felt that to be the case in some of our life experiences. What have we done? Have we identified with the violent flux, or have we been able to stand back in a mind held steady in delight? All that he cherishes and holds dear in the three worlds may be crashing around him. But in spite of all, he stands firm, poised in soul consciousness. And whatever's happening out there, the depths of his life remain undisturbed. Can you see yourself in that state? It's a bit like the St. Francis prayer, isn't it? God grant me the serenity, to know the things I cannot change, the wisdom to change the things I can. No, maybe it becomes, maybe the courage in forgetting to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So a new form of life, which is serene rather than evasively peaceful, takes over. And this, what is it? That's what it is. His depths are not troubled by the outer troubles. This is not insensitivity or a forced auto-suggestion, because we can turn ourselves off, as it were, or we can repeat some hypnotic formula which says, you know, I am calm, I am serene, you know, using affirmations to do this. Neither is it a capacity to exteriorize the consciousness in such a manner that individual events and happenings are ignored. Like I'm so far beyond and above this that no matter what happens, I don't pay attention. No, attention has always to be paid. It's the kind of attention. And then comes the statement. It is intensity of feeling transmuted into focused understanding. Somehow the deep stress of the astral body is transmuted into an attitude of serenity and calm, focused understanding of what is really happening. It's very different than getting pulled in to the chaos. Focused understanding. And we recall what understanding is, to stand under, and in the beginning of the Glamour book, we get some description of that. It's a sense of being the pervading life, standing under and behind all confusions and embroilments on the outer stage. We say, take a deep breath, stand back, or do you immediately engage with the solar plexus? So that's one of those golden phrases about what serenity really is. Intensity of feeling transmuted into focused understanding. And when this has been attained, the disciple, the chela, has the right to live within the aura of the master. Let's none of us presume too quickly that we are ready for this privilege. There is nothing now in him, the chela, which will require the master to sidetrack his attention from vital efforts. And there comes that humbling statement to the unimportant task of helping the disciple. So since this stage is far in advance of so many of us, it's obvious that so many of us have not developed this ability to take intensity of feeling and transmute it into focused understanding. There's just no substitute for experience, and that will require time. The occult path is not for those who are in a hurry. The personality, knowing that time is short, as the Tibetan says, is always in a hurry. But the soul takes measured steps and thereby assures that there will be some degree of success. An accepted disciple, therefore, advances, if I may so express it, through the medium of three vibratory realizations. And what are these three? For the advancement of the accepted disciple. And does he mean the disciple accepted into the aura? Because I guess in a way, once you are an accepted disciple, you are certainly accepted. You will be, before long, could we call it an accepted initiate? And you will be closer and closer to the master because you have understood and synchronized your energy system with what he seeks to see accomplished. So the accepted disciple, whatever specifically Master DK means by that here, advances through the medium of three vibratory realizations. He reacts to the vibration, the note, or the quality of an ashram according to his ray type. The periphery of a master's sphere of group control. And this is another way of naming the ashram, is contacted by him, and he becomes an accepted disciple in full waking consciousness. I think we can say it is possible to be accepted without at first knowing it. The master is aware of his presence upon the outer fringe of his, the master's, consciousness. His fellow disciples are also aware of another point of light within the ashram, largely because of the effort they have to make to offset the new chela's personality reactions to the new mode of life, to the effects wrought into his consciousness by his penetration into the world of meaning, that is, the world of the soul, and to the outsurging of his devotion to the master. Interesting that one must protect the master from these outsurgings of devotion, which can bind the feet of the teacher. I don't know what it does to the master, but obviously it's not really desirable. It may be desirable or satisfying from the point of view of the devoted disciple, but it is something of a hindrance if we're going to talk about the effect upon the master. So they become aware of a new point of light entering and of the personality reactions, because the mode of life is new, and those personality reactions being disturbing. Here it says it becomes the task of more advanced chelas to protect the master, or at least to prevent the waste of the master's time, from the violent reactions of the new chela, and to stand between him and the neophyte. So maybe what satisfies us so much regarding our sending of devotion towards the master has really to be examined. It's so easy to take something that satisfies us and imagine that somehow the master, very busy individual, is gratified by it. Some initiate chela takes him in hand and acts as an intermediary. The chela is, the chela, as I have earlier pointed out, is in touch with the master when and only when the master so desires it, and it would be good and helpful for the entire group This is the aspiring Chela, not the initiate Chela. We can see how carefully everything is managed so that there is a minimum of friction within the ashram. Now, is this the same as the Chela who reports upon the Chela in the light? No, I don't think so. I think this is still farther along. And the question is this done on the inner planes, or will the initiate Chela be put in touch with the new member of the ashram on the outer planes? Let's just say here. So it seems that the master is not overly desirous of the company of the new Chela. Who can be rightly handled. So the Chela is taken in hand. It's good to know that there are such safeguards. And the master will deal with the Chela when his estimation of so doing indicates that the ashram as a whole will benefit, and not otherwise. Not otherwise. So we've been dealing with modes of advancement. The first one, let's call it reacting to the vibration, the note, or quality of an ashram, according to his ray type. And an ashram is the master's sphere of group control. So awareness is there, but if the Chela is overly concerned about his impact on the ashram, it's really just another point of disturbance and a delay in having the Chela synchronize with the master and with the real work of the ashram. That impersonality, that decentralization have to be instituted to an even greater extent than in the case of Chela on the thread. Obviously, a great selflessness grows even as the Christ and his consciousness demonstrates a great degree of selflessness. Now, further, regarding the advancement of the Chela into the ashram, he realizes increasingly the nature and note of his ashram and advances from the periphery in terms of his understanding and capacity, I suppose, into the sphere of influence of the master and his, that is, the master's group. He then begins to participate more and more in the group life and is less and less interested in himself. That's so hard to achieve, you know. Because in the beginning, despite our best intentions, we have still, even at a relatively high state of accepted discipleship, a lot of interest in ourselves in the lower external personal sense. So he consequently becomes a more valuable asset in the ashram and is entrusted with specific duties and tasks for which he is individually responsible. To the initiate Chela in charge of him. Well, and participating more and more, and with less and less interest in his lower nature. His soul nature is ever at one with the intent of the ashram. What position then, friends, have we reached? To what degree are we interested in ourselves? And to what degree are we interested in the work? Forget yourself, aid the plan, the work needs you. But if we fixate upon the fact that the work needs us, we've fallen back all over again into keeping our eyes too much upon the lower personal self. So what happens here? There is an initiate Chela Now, we have to question, when it comes to the stage of Shayla in the light, whether the supervising, guiding Shayla, who reports to the master about the progress of the Shayla in the light that he is supervising, whether that Shayla is initiate or at one of the higher stages of discipleship. Perhaps not initiate in the same way that this is being described, an initiate Shayla in charge of the lesser Shayla advancing through the stages of accepted discipleship, Shayla on the thread, and Shayla within the aura. The master begins to contact him, the aspiring Shayla, with greater frequency, and because he is becoming, it takes time, he is becoming decentralized, and his own growth and development are of less and less importance to him than service for others. And note that. That's one of the key requirements. Hard to establish. Have we established that? Is our own growth and development of lesser importance to us than service to others? What a discriminating question. Real service to others, paramount, and not our own growth and development. Remember that door of initiation, which is too narrow for the selfish, still selfish would-be initiate, but how when he grasps the hands of his fellow students and disciples and other human beings, but human beings who are ready for initiation, then the door is not too narrow. What a lesson that is. And what a discrimination that is. So I say to you, I say to me, don't rest until the development of your service and the welfare of others is of greater importance to you than your own growth and development. The irony is, of course, that when you have that type of attitude, your own growth and development is assured. And notice the master must wait until there is significant decentralization before it is safe and non-inflationary. Speaking of the inflated lower sense of selfhood, to contact the Chela. It is our centralization in a false identity which makes the master hold back in his contacting of the Chela. But now, decentralized, impersonal, one-pointed, able to handle both perspectives of soul within the personality and soul abstracted from the personality. He is qualifying for a certain permission. He is permitted, it says, to attract the master's attention when help is needed for the group, and thus become a Chela on the thread. I guess we see how many different kinds of permissions are required, and Master DK himself, we know, is very scrupulous about having the permission to impart what he does impart. The Antakarana, it says, is being rapidly built, and the inflow of life from the spiritual triad increases slowly and regularly. So this is a period approaching the second initiation, at least beginning. But if we're really dealing with the Chela in the aura, the Antakarana has been further built than will be possible for anyone who is just beginning to build it in the period preceding the second initiation. The Antakarana rapidly being built. He has reached the point. So you help Master DK is helping us to really identify where we stand, and we can proceed with far greater accuracy and solidity and certainty and confidence that we will not mislead ourselves, delude ourselves, or be misled by false teachers or inadequately experienced teachers. He has the Chela, has reached a point where, upon the outer plane, he is gathering around him a sphere of influence as the result of his soul radiation via the personality. Now, we're kind of reviewing accepted discipleship and Chela on the thread as we're looking at this stage of Chela in the aura. So, soul radiation is strongly here. Even as the decentralization is occurring. It's such a point, this decentralization. You see some very public figures who have a lot of power, and they're so far from decentralization. I suppose the opposite of decentralization is a kind of malignant narcissism. And this we have seen demonstrated of late, and it is disruptive of so many good things which humanity could experience. So he is gathering around him a sphere of influence, presumably with other Chelas who can benefit from what he has to offer. It might be stated, here we go, I guess with some golden points. It might be stated that no disciple becomes a Chela on the thread until he has many people in the outer world who, on a lower turn of the spiral, are to him what he is to the master. Chelas on the thread. We're, in a way, the master holds the thread. Remember, doesn't mean in his hands, but he sends it forth. Spelling that. Finally, and if you think a little bit about Bucyrus here, who has to wake up to his own false teaching in the labors of Hercules Gemini, in a distorted and frequently unsatisfactory fashion. He is engaged in forming his own group. And today this is very often the case. And he imparts to them what he can, but it's not the same as what the master can impart to the true Chela on the thread. Says the Tibetan, the world is full of struggling disciples, rate 4, right? Intensely preoccupied with forming organizations, with gathering around them those whom they can help, thus striking a particular note and learning the rudiments. And here, Master DK wants to make sure we understand that the term is rudiments. The rudiments, I repeat, my brother, of group work as the hierarchy seeks to carry it out. So we see maybe a lot of errors going on with the so-called teacher or director of a group, because necessarily being in a position to answer and direct and guide on the outer plane those whom his magnetism has gathered around him is making errors at first. So no disciple becomes a chela on the thread unless there are many people out there that he is actually at least attempting to help. That's an important statement and helps us discern whether we have the requirements or have fulfilled the requirements of going through this stage of chela on the thread. You see what Master DK is doing here. He is taking a couple of the preliminary stages or stages preliminary to chela within the aura, and he's showing how they lead up to that much more advanced stage. And there is a problem with this kind of work, but it has to be gone through. So what are we doing here? Recognizing the note of his ashram, and we are advancing towards the stage of chela within the aura. He's reacting to the vibration according to his ray type. That's number one. And number two, he is realizing the nature and note of his ashram, something that is not realized overnight. And finally, we get to number three, as he is advancing toward the possibility of being within the aura. Now, what else? As he advances, he responds powerfully, and from his point of view, quite unexpectedly, to the realized vibration of the master as he functions at the very center of his group. Well, he's going to respond to certainly to the note of the ashram, but to actually respond to the master's note as the monadic center of the ashram is already of a higher caliber. He has known the master's vibratory call. I suppose every time we pick up a Bailey book in the beginning of our novitiate, and we stay with it and with the other impartations of the master, we are responding to the master's vibratory call. He has become aware of the quality of the ashram, which is evoked by the master. So what are all of those other disciples really doing in the ashram? And how is it maybe different from what he has been doing? Or can he synchronize his doing, his thinking, his attitude, his consciousness with what they have in terms of their thinking, attitude, their doings, and their consciousness? He is now admitted to the secret place to be found at the very heart of the ashram, and becomes a chela within the aura. So many details about how this gradual process occurs, but if we read attentively and think with our full memorization capacities activated, then the advice of the master will be with us as we prepare the things necessary in order to move forward. So these are, let's say, two earlier stages of advancement. And now a third. He is admitted to the secret place to be found at the very heart of the ashram. It's not yet the chela within the master's heart, but DK is using the word heart. It is very close to the master and his intentions. So this stage for which we are speaking of preparation is, we see more and more, a high stage. And maybe, you know, it's probably not the stage which is immediately ahead of us. There are other things to handle. So many disciples are chelas in the light and are being guided towards the possibility of having a more direct relationship with the master as an accepted disciple. And he has given us, let's say, enough information about the kind of experience that may indicate to us that, though we did not know it probably, indicates to us that we are an accepted disciple. The aura of any form of life can be defined as the quality of a sphere of radiatory activity. Here he's going to tell us that we don't really know so much about what auras are. The quality of a sphere of radiatory activity. I notice the word quality because it suggests the ray of this sphere of radiatory activity. Very little is as yet known about auras, and a great deal of nonsense has been written against anent the matter. The aura is usually spoken of in terms of color and light due to the nature of the vision of the one who sees and the apparatus of response which is in use. So this is the customary, and let's call it that. Customary description, because of the seer's limitations. However, 2 words only describe an aura from the point of view of occult knowledge, and they are quality and sphere of influence. Quality probably relating to one of the major 7 qualities, and the degree of refinement of that type of radiation. And then how far does it go? I've told the story of the Dalai Lama's apparently approaching aura when Tuya and I were in Tallinn, Estonia, waiting for him and his entourage to arrive in the church where there was to be a lecture and discussion. But you could feel that it was quite a large sphere of influence. And when you're going to be talking about the Buddha and the Christ, we're talking globally now, the sphere of influence. The Christ asked someone when he was passing by, who touched the hem of my garment, I guess the lower part of his aura, because he sensed that there had been a contact. These are all occult matters and very real to those who take occultism for a reality instead of some fantasy. So what the clairvoyant really contacts is an impression which the mind rapidly translates into the symbology of color, whereas there is no color presence. Now that's an important and maybe unexpected point, because we keep on thinking, I know I do, of what we will see when we see the egoic lotus. But in fact, it is the impression of the radiation which is mentally translated into color and sound. So let's really emphasize that idea, which is an unusual one, were the average psychic to consider what is being said. Seeing an aura, as it is called, is in reality a state of awareness that the seer, in all sincerity, believes that he has registered a color. And remember, Master Decay, in seeing the egoic lotus drawn, has given us colors of its various parts, because that is how registration occurs. That the seer may, in all sincerity, believe that he has registered a color, a series of color, as in the petals, or light, is entirely true. In many cases. But what he has really recorded is the quality of a sphere of radiatory influence. This he does when his own individual sphere of radiatory activity is of the same nature and quality as that contacted. So here is a more occult understanding of what it means to see an aura. And whatever that translation process is, within the mind, within the consciousness, the angel of the presence is qualified to know and does know, and we don't really know, not yet. So he is recording, the average seer is recording the quality of a sphere of radiatory activity. So DK is taking us a little bit more into advanced territory. This he does when his own individual sphere of radiatory activity is of the same nature and quality as that contacted. Well, we have to ask, can a lesser disciple, though clairvoyant, really see what's going on in the egoic lotus or causal body of a more advanced disciple? Most seers, says the Tibetan, register the astral range of vibration of a person or a group, and this through the medium of their own astral body. The impact of a truth or of a mental concept and its recognition is an expression of a similar contact. So that's to measure then, or register, let's call it, the mental level with the, I suppose, the mental body of the seer, the impact of a truth or of a mental concept and its recognition is an expression of a similar contact carried forward this time into the realm of the mind. So here maybe is an example of us thinking we know what clairvoyance may mean, only to have the subject deepened by the master and have him hint at a process within our own consciousness of which we may not have been cognizant. But for sure, our sensitivity in these respects will grow, and we will register the quality of a sphere of radiatory activity. And I think this is an important statement, that seeing an aura, about which I suppose some would become very excited, as it is called, is in reality a state of awareness. In other words, maybe we're not really looking at something objectively, but the impact formulates as a certain phenomenon in consciousness. So always to proceed with respect for the unknown explanation in occultism, which may not have been imparted yet or realized. Now, all this explains the truth lying behind all so-called expansions of consciousness to which the mind of man can respond. So he's going to perhaps deal here with expansions of consciousness in a similar deepening manner. He, the Chela, registers a constant succession of vibratory impacts emanating from spheres of activity, from various points of tension on various planes and subplanes, these points of tension creating spheres of activity. These range all the way from the early stages of increasing awareness through the development of the 5 senses and the 3 vehicles of contact in the 3 worlds, etheric, physical, astral, mental, which lead a man into the sphere of influence of a master, and later enable him to take what is termed one of the major initiations. But you know, we have to know what's really going on here, and not just be satisfied with phenomena what appears to be happening. Always in occultism, go deeper than the obvious. Is the story that man, like the reptile, the tuatara, once had one eye on top of its head? Is it true that the five senses, in the case of most, need development? We can become preoccupied with possibilities on various planes and subplanes. And we can miss our opportunities to become more occultly aware. So what range of vibrations from a person do we actually register? And is there a visual component in that registration? And do we really ever, most of us, get so far as to register the apparent color and sound and vibratory movement or dynamics of the egoic lotus? These spheres of activity are ever present, even when unregistered and unrecognized. The sphere of influence of a master has a lot to do with the Buddhic plane, usually. And we are progressively on the borderland between Buddhi, Manas. So, when we expand our consciousness, we are touching higher spheres of radiatory activity. They exist even when unregistered and unknown to us. The evolutionary process, says the Tibetan, is one of developing a response apparatus with which to register them. I mean, there are so many people that say, what are you seeing? What are you saying? I don't register anything like that. Well, the response apparatus is not yet built. So, to evolve, we have to develop that apparatus, and having done so, the next step is to reach or react intelligently to such contacts higher than normal, thus producing an ever-increasing range of awareness, which finally constitutes the sum total of consciousness. So we have to develop this higher aspect. I mean, this is simply, in a way, normal evolution. When I was in music school, I was in the company of some quite advanced people. When they heard something played on the piano, they could write it down just from hearing, and they could put the harmonies down and so forth, and they could do that with accuracy, and not every one of us could do that. So, with a more developed response apparatus, there will be an ever increasing range of consciousness. And that's why we take a look at the Tibetan in that photograph from 1928. There he is, a human being, and he is flanked by two Tibetans who look very much like they would be his chevas at one stage or another. And yet the picture of an apparently ordinary individual is belied by the fact that such a expansive and sensitive apparatus has been built by him, a response apparatus, and that his sum total of consciousness is vast indeed. So you can't, you can't judge a book by its cover. Although there are, let's say, indications, and maybe they can be found, who knows by what subtle means, but perhaps the eyes give the key somewhat to the depth of consciousness of the individual. He says, I cannot here enlarge upon this theme as it proceeds under the impelling force of evolution. The theme of the expansion and growth of consciousness. I am only here concerned with the fact of the master's sphere of radiatory activity and its peculiar quality and ray coloring. Notice he watches out for that word coloring, occultly understood. So, real concern is the aura as occultly defined. And we've been given now some definitions of the aura. The quality of a sphere of radiatory activity and the ray coloring of that quality, the quality and extent. I think it was the philosopher Kant who tried to describe categories of consciousness, which basically said the things that are being observed are not really there so much as they are the brain's response, the brain's structuring to whatever really is there, whatever really is contacted. Anyway, we know we do advance, and he's telling us somewhat the mode by which this happens as we become in closer relationship to the master's sphere of radiatory activity and its particular or peculiar quality and ray coloring, occultly understood. So for those of us who feel that the causal body is filled with color and sound and vibration and so forth, it is in the sense that our consciousness registers it that way. And to that testimony within our consciousness of the sphere of radiatory activity, the master frequently returns to see really what is the condition of the consciousness and what is the condition of the inner consciousness when compared with the outer expression. So to the colors seen and the sounds heard are not insignificant. It's just that their origin is different from what is more naively suspected. We feel a certain amount of the complexity of what Master DK is attempting to convey to us, and we will do our best to assimilate that complexity until it becomes a practical aspect of our knowledge. There's no way we're going to absorb but 2 or 3% of what is being conveyed so that it becomes a well memorized and familiar approach in our understanding. So voluminous is his presentation. Maybe think about it for a moment. Some of us have not even read all the books. And when it comes to understanding, perhaps we understand the section we're in a bit. And as we move on to the next section, the former understanding becomes a little vaguer. And we discover we don't retain it the way it would be desirable to do. But maybe that's what those Tibetan universities are for. Advanced souls enter in a one-pointed manner, and the degree of their advancement is seen ahead of time, and they learn through outer activity and inner meditative process to make the kinds of things the Tibetan is talking about a standard aspect of their evaluation of reality. But you can see why it's going to take time. And when you think of how advanced the Tibetan was even 2,500 years ago, as second in command at the Pythagorean school or academy at Crotona in Asia Minor, you realize that, well, 2,500 years has passed. What was he doing all that time? And obviously his knowledge was deepening all the time. Whereas for some of us, it's our very first experience being an accepted disciple, if in fact we have reached that experience at all. The Tibetan goes on. The factor lying behind and thus making possible each of the 6 stages of discipleship is the existence in the disciple of qualities, radiatory activities, and emanating impulses, which correspond to those emanating from a particular ashram. We don't want to bark up the wrong tree, if you know what I mean. So many of us would be just useless, you know, specifically third ray ashram or fifth ray ashram or whatever other ashram that is not one in which our qualities, radiatory activities, and emanating impulses correspond to some particular ashram. So we have to choose a right, and sometimes in the beginning, mistakes will be made, and we will find ourselves in some learning situation. Never hurts to learn what's going on in another ashram, but if carried on too far inappropriately, we're missing the kind of instruction which specifically we need to advance spiritually along our ray line of qualities, radiatory activities, and emanatory impulses. So, friends, do we really recognize what's coming out of us and to which ashram those emanations are appropriate? Now, of course, Master DK has a big training ashram, and he takes many students whose ultimate home, spiritually considered, is not with him, but he does take up the humble task of preparing them for more graduated work, solid work in the ashram of their true belonging. That Jesuit priest always comes to my mind. I can't remember if his name is PDC or something like that. Anyway, he learned, because he was a second-ray soul, a lot from Master DK. His rays were 2, 6, 5, 6, 7, with 2 representing the soul. And even after death, which had been induced by a different ray, he worked with Master DK. He was a valuable and advanced disciple. But then the time came for transference to his own true home, which I suppose monadically indicated the first ray of Master Moria. There's the hint about the first ray monad. So, he had to understand what energies were coming out of him. I wonder if we take a moment and summarize for our own clarification some of the energies that we find coming out of ourselves emanatorily. Because that's what will help. We know what is coming forth from our nature. Is it the light-bearing influence of the second ray? Is it that shielding, guarding, protective love of the second ray? Is it the quest for omniscience, ever dissatisfied with one's highest attainments in learning of the second ray? Well, I mentioned the second ray emanations because we are in a way such a second ray group, and I guess to admit I was simply thinking about the qualities coming out of me, and you would do the same. There are other qualities, and maybe they hint at the monadic ray. The man who was killed by the Nazis Was his name Monchart? I really should look that up. Yeah. So his name was Jean Monchart. In his PDW, patience, dynamic thought, and wisdom. And he is that one who was involved in the French Revolution, and certain of his emanatory qualities had to have been along the first ray line. His soul was the second ray, but it suggests the monad of the first ray. And there'll come a time, I mean, he was ready for Master Moria's ashram, and he was transferred into Master Moria's ashram, eventually after death, after working for the Tibetans for a while. But the emanatory qualities can include the monadic ray, but perhaps at first are more likely to include the soul ray. Okay, so we have to recognize what is coming out of us. What are those radiations? What is the scope of radiation? And then we'll know our proper ashramic tree, as it were. We can bark up that tree. But maybe that's not such an easy thing to do immediately. But with experience, more and more, it comes. I have a dear friend, and I just know he's not barking up the same tree that I am, ashramically considered. He's a mathematician, what can I call it? A man dedicated to refining optic machinery and its use. I think he considers all questions of immortality to be nonsense. Somehow we're very dear friends, but different qualities, different radiatory activities, different emanatory impulses come forth. I have 3 children in this incarnation. One of them shares, I'm certain, the same soul ray as my own, the second ray, but perhaps not the same master on that ray. The other is a philosophic reasoning soul who does not believe unless it can be logically proven. The other is a former and potentially reawakening occultist on the 7th ray. And there the line for conversation is much more open, because we know that Well, many seventh ray people, believe it or not, can believe fantastical things, but they can also enter deeply into occultism once they become more learned and become less involved with technique, you might say. So we are radiating, we are emanating, we are sending forth for the benefit of others. And hopefully we find those for whom there is a real benefit. Otherwise, you know, we're like the master who tries to teach people who are not synchronized with him. Well, he'll do something. There were a few of those in Master DK's group, a couple of seventh ray souls who just weren't in sync with Master DK. And there was, well, there were a couple of third ray souls. I think Master DK has a lot of that in his nature. From a monadic perspective, but he was only successful so far with them. So there has to be an attunement between what the student contains and what the master can offer. And generally speaking, it will end with the student dropping his tuition, his applied study and practice along the master's line, if the possibility of deep synchronization really isn't there. Anyway, what's making possible each of the 6 stages of discipleship is what's coming out of the student. These impulses, which at this stage, friends, we all have, these, when they have evoked a response and drawn the disciple to the periphery of the sphere of activity of such an ashram, gradually intensify their magnetic attractive quality. They awaken to still greater potency the same qualities in the disciple, occultly pulling him closer to the central point. Well, here we may be talking about what happens to the accepted disciple, what happens to the chela on the thread, and the central point, the center of the aura where the master can be found. Drawing him closer to the central point, which is the focus of all the trained ability and high-powered spiritual life of the master at the very heart of the ashram. So whatever we have in us, as it reaches the point of acceptance, is strengthened still more as that peripheral existence with respect to the ashram is established. We're drawn in. And if all goes as it should, then the master, who is the very heart of the ashram, and also, let's call it the monadic head of the ashram, is approached. Probably it's best for us realistically, if we are feeling with justification that we are an accepted disciple, to consider ourselves at first a point of ashramic disturbance, of which the master is aware, but of which the higher members of the ashram are also aware and have to do what they can to negate our, at first, disruptive influence. It is, says the Tibetan, at this point that the disciple awakens to the realization that his three bodies or vehicles, etheric, astral, and mental, are only the reflections of the three aspects of the spiritual triad. I think we're dealing with kind of superimposition and not inversion. So Atma to mind, Buddhic always to astral, and in this case, monastic to etheric physical. There is another way of doing it, and it turns things a little upside down, of atmic to etheric physical, and as usual, Buddhic to astral, and then higher mind to lower mind. So simply reflections. I'm not sure exactly which one he's talking about, but either one works. Reflections of the three aspects of the spiritual triad, and can be generated in a Maya Varupa from those outposts within the spiritual triad for the fourth degree initiate and beyond. I don't think a third degree initiate can generate a Maya Varupa. So these etheric, astral, mental bodies and their, shall we say, higher sources can give him the key to his own being and to the capacity to respond to the threefold vibration of the master as expressed through his aura. Well, the master is the monad of the ashram, and the monad is threefold. Ever the process is one of increasingly knowing ourselves. And it certainly doesn't stop with going to a psychologist and finding out what one's camomonastic complexes actually are. The teaching that the personality must be destroyed is a distortion of the truth. Eventually, it is, if anything, enhanced by the originating points of activity in the triad when a Maya Virupa can be created. So DK corrects many misconceptions which, if followed, would lead to trouble and would beat the personality into being what the Tibetan has elsewhere called a poor, dead thing. In fact, having a vibrant personality which is really attuned with the angel is characteristic of many of the foremost sons and daughters of God, who, with their intense radiation passing through the personality, manage to inspire many. So it's a distortion. The personality as an elemental resource will be destroyed or negated at the fourth degree, but the qualities that made the personality what it was in its particular degree of advancement and coming from the triad, they will be preserved. His focus of consciousness has to be shifted from the threefold lower nature. Take one's eyes off the personal self into that of the triad, and this, with the aid of the threefold soul nature, somehow a very important statement. From the three, it's a 9, isn't it? From the threefold personality through the essentially threefold soul. Now, how shall we consider it? Shall we say the 9 petals, the 3 petals, the jewel and the lotus? Or shall we say knowledge petals, love petals, sacrifice petals? Well, we'll find a 3 in there because the 9, in a way, within the egoic lotus are reflective of the points of origin within the spiritual triad. And then you add those 3 and you get 9, which is the cyclic number of the third ray. It's good, isn't it, to be disabused of our illusions concerning the spiritual path. So easy to pick up something a teacher has said, or which is floating around as general knowledge, and later find out from reading the Tibetan that it's not really so, and that we have, by following such advice, been deluded, led astray. The mode of this progressive shifting is response to an ever higher rate of vibratory activity. Just as soon as there exists in the consciousness of the disciple the ability to respond to the quality and the radiation emanating from the ashram, he moves forward into that sphere of influence. So sensitivity to the looming higher quality ends up being very important. It's our way. It is our way of moving forward. So in fact, we're always trying to attune to something higher, some emanating source, some point of tension. Of course, we have to stabilize the point of tension at which we find ourselves, because every point of tension is a doorway, and we cannot climb a rickety series of stairs. The whole thing might collapse. So we have to secure our position on each one of those steps, or maybe we can say on each rung of the ladder. And it becomes true that haste does make waste if we cannot be firm in our ability to deal with what our present point of tension reveals to us. That in his own aura, or that in his own aura, which is akin to the quality of the master's aura, is trained, intensified, and purified. Maybe a lot of secondary things are left aside, but whatever will make him a more synchronous unit in relation to the master is trained and intensified and purified. What would it be with master decay? Well, voluminous knowledge and deep meditative practice and an insistence on right human relations, which of the 5 outwardly emerging ashrams forthcoming is particularly designated in relation to Master DK's ashram, right human relations, which is a huge shambolic theme. I speculate, friends, about some of these things with Master DK. I could be quite incorrect on some of them, at least, I think. And I do it according to the best of my reasoning and maybe an occasional flash of revelation. But the time is not yet when we can know for sure more about him and his techniques and his real ashramic management. That time will come as we move closer to a position within the aura. But service and selflessness and reduction of self-concern and self-centralization, these are key. So we have to judge how ready we are to establish those states in our consciousness and activity. Now, of the Chela, his own radiatory activity is advanced as the ashramic life plays upon his vehicles until in time he becomes the Chela within the aura. So the ashram is definitely a source of stimulation and of inevitable growth if the opportunity will be seized. To develop oneself is not necessarily a sign of selfishness. It's going to happen automatically the more fully we synchronize with the master and his ashram and their radiation and intent. But to be preoccupied with that development rather than with the task at hand, that is a drawback. So his own radiatory activity is enhanced rather, as the ashramic life plays upon his vehicles. Do any of us sense this happening? Until in time he becomes a Chela within the aura. In a faint way, his vibration and that of the master tend to synchronize. And there we go again with that word, right? It means, in a way, same timeness, but it also means a kind of attunement, a rhythm. The following of the master's rhythm is part of that. Now we know Master DK is participating in these full moon opportunities, and he told at least his students of the time that he would be on the outlook or the lookout for their approach within 12 hours before the full moon, and maybe he could do something to enhance the group quality. So that's a rhythm, observing the full moon rhythm, and maybe add to it the new moon, and the rhythm of certain very holy times, the Wesak festival, the festival of Leo, the festival of Easter, and Gemini. Observing those festivals is also part of the rhythm. So the word chronos is in there when it means time, and we start talking about the master's rhythm. But there's something more. We might be able to say that we synchronize even though the word might not be exact in its use, with the master's quality, and maybe with the pulse of his radiation. We can't reach, as he reaches, the same extent, but there's some kind of qualitative aspect which is related to this synchronization. The master is the very center of our ashramic life, and it's not by waves of devotion, which can be obstructive, that we approach a condition of necessary synchronization. We just have to understand what is troublemaking from a newly inducted point of ashramic light, and be prepared to be surprised. There's no hiding from the ashram. If you're brought near it, there's just so many aspects of the personality life which you may be inclined to intrude upon the affairs of the ashram, and that would be a big mistake. The ashram, or let's just say the personality doesn't really enter the ashram at all. The higher correspondences to the personality, those points of triadal activity, yes, they enter the ashram. But are we sure enough to be able to identify them? It's all such a question of disabusing ourselves of the preoccupation with the lesser while we move on to the greater, and taking very seriously, but with a sense of humor at times, that moving on. DK goes on. I would point out that in this way, the disciple begins to make a significant contribution to the life of the ashram, not just the newly inducted troublemaker, even without knowing he's a troublemaker. Each disciple who penetrates into the aura of the master through similarity of quality and vibratory activity enriches and intensifies the group with which he is affiliated. Now, there is a statement. But we are on that stage of Shela in the aura, and we are speaking of penetration into the aura in this 5th stage. So it's not earlier stages we are so much discussing, but a little bit of how they lead toward this stage, towards So don't we want to make a significant contribution to the life of the ashram? We certainly don't. I think DK used the word, didn't he? We don't want to be a drag. We all know what that's like, to be a drag and to have to deal with those who hold up progress. And the worst is, but I don't think you're going to find it here, those who hold up progress and at the same time have an unwillingness to improve or change. I don't think such an individual would get this far, but we encounter it all the time, and it's a very frustrating thing. Very frustrating. But when people don't see, they don't see. And even more difficult is the situation of those who refuse to see, those who will not see, those who might see, but they refuse. And I told you the story of my own life, how I was being introduced to a place which for 6 years literally saved my spiritual and artistic life. And I, being a young, stupid person, I hid myself in the car that was passing through and refused to see. Only later, when I went there, because my head occasionally popped up, I recognized what I had refused to see. So we have to catch ourselves. You know, the Hercules has to hunt the lion. And then there is hope that this lion of self-assertion can be trapped by the initiate unicorn, which is also within us. As time elapses, the ashram of the master becomes increasingly potent. We don't expect this of the ashrams in early formation. The ashram of the master becomes increasingly potent, magnetic, and radiant. Within that aura, the initiate disciple, and that's what he is by this time, if he's in the aura, he's an initiate in the sense that the third degree is the true first initiation. And you really are not going to be a chela within the aura unless you've taken the third degree. As time elapses, the ashram of a master becomes increasingly potent and magnetic. Within that aura, the initiate disciple, I think he called Roberto Assagioli by that name, or by the name disciple initiate. The initiate disciple carries forward the work, his work, standing at the radiant center of the group life and working from thence outwards in service. He is ever careful to protect that center from any quality of his own aura, which is not in harmony with the quality of the master, and to keep, as far as may be, outside his own consciousness any thoughts or desires which might disturb the group aura. So here is our increasingly magnetic center, and here is our disciple, initiate, or initiated disciple, or initiate disciple, working scrupulously at his work, but also to prepare, rather to protect the aura of the master and the goings-on of the master from his work, if his work is not properly attuned. So responsibility, protective responsibility. And when he's admitted to this stage, he's just not admitted unless he really can guard himself. And the sphere of influence, another name for the ashram, of which he is a part. So again, friends, the road is winding upwards all the way. And if we do not demonstrate fitness, we will not find ourselves in the position where the privilege of being part of the master's aura or within it can be accorded to us. There's no fooling the powers that be. There's no pretending. There's no claim making. The master sees. We are seeing accordingly. So let's realize that the kind of deep honesty which sees the bad as well as the good in our own nature is required. And that we learn through DK's description of occult silence in Rule 11 of the Rays and the Initiations, how to compartmentalize the contents of our consciousness. There are just some things that don't belong in the context of the ashram. And if we have found ourselves indulging in those thoughts in any way, we have to find the way to eradicate them, or at least at first compartmentalize such thoughts so they do not inflict themselves on the quality of the aura. You can see, therefore, that the hierarchy itself is only a great ashram with a triangle at the center. I think that tells us something about ashrams and groupings, and in one of those 4 triangled 9-pointed figures, always there is a leading triangle at the center. Maybe there's something there about the ashram itself. Certainly DK was organizing his groups of 9 in such a way. A triangle at the center, leading, and then at every apex of that triangle, 2 other points would appear, making 3 other triangles. 4 triangles, 9 points. You can see, therefore, that the hierarchy itself is only a great ashram with a triangle at the center, composed of the Christ, the Mahachohan, and the Manu, the 3 great lords. Now, symbolically speaking, this triangle constitutes one radiant center. You know how it is when the rotation occurs, it all blazes forth, and the points themselves are lost in that general sphere of radiance. This triangle constitutes one radiant center for the radiatory activity of each of the great lords is such that they are swept into each other's auras, in such a way that there is a complete blending and fusing. Well, think about that on a much more individual lower turn of the spiral. The dispelling radiance of the triangle in the head, which head center, ajna, alta major, which makes of the individual the true healer. It's like a sphere of activity, because each one of the stimulated apexes is swept into the sphere of the other 2. So a complete blending and fusing. So whether we're dealing with the early stages of circulation or a real interpenetration among the apexes that makes a sphere of activity, this will depend on how far progressed this triangular movement really is. Every ashram radiates one major quality according to the ray of the master at the center. In the same way, the hierarchy radiates the quality of the second divine aspect, just as the all-inclusive ashram, to which we give the name Shambhala, has the outstanding characteristic of the first aspect, life itself. This is not a quality, but that of which quality is emanation, an emanation. So, I tend to call it, pure being. So every ashram represents some basic, major quality. But the hierarchy has for its major quality the second aspect, which I can portray in the color indigo. And finally, Shambhala itself, which has that quality, if we can call it a quality, of the first ray, but really something even deeper than the first ray, which is pure being itself. So this is not really a quality, but something of which quality is an emanation. I've been trying to get that point across, in a way, the whole world emanates from what we essentially are. The Vedantists knew this, the Brahmins knew this, from India and well before, they knew this. You can't have a 1, 2, 3 unless you have a source for the 1, 2, 3, and all of us fundamentally are that source. We're neither exclusively forever the 1, the 2, or the 3. And in fact, when you think about us coming forth in any universe, it's not the same reduced us. It's not like something we call the monad is preserved from universe to universe. It's a new self-reduction. Really, we have the experience of being all things. And the only thing we are with consistency is that fount of all emanations that we call pure being. That is what we are. Now, my next broadcast calls to me. So it'll be necessary to go there, or at least get ready for it. And we've looked at sort of 6 pages here. So a longish program, maybe close to 3 hours. And I know that very few of you have the opportunity to sit down with such things and to study for 3 hours straight. And besides, you might like to, so to speak, rewind and review various things that are said. But this is for those who can benefit from it. in ways which they choose and in times which they have. So basically, again, 7:49 to 7:55, and we're ready, but I almost never succeed after doing another program because the Glamour program will be almost 2 hours, and I've been working here for well over 3 hours. So I almost never succeed in on the same night going on, though I would love to go on with program 21, starting on page 755, and it's still a long time to deal with this idea of the aura. We're on 755, and it's going to take a while to get to my next big, a long time, get to my next big red mark at 764. That's 9 pages, and that can be well over one program. Okay, so speed reading course here, friends. Here we are, page 755, and we will begin on program 21, and meanwhile, I'll try to get this in order for you, found on Makara or on our YouTube Moria Federation Esoteric Education. I will realize and must realize, and you should realize, that the Tibetan words are the main thing here, by far the main thing. But it may be possible to provide links from one phase of the Tibetan's teaching to another, and along that link, light may appear. And eventually, a contribution to the great sphere of knowledge, which the Tibetan has produced for us, and more coming around the year 2025. He didn't get too specific. He did use, I think, the word around. So Tuya and I and all of the communications group wish you a lot of love and successful study, and deepened meditation, and also application, however you can find the way to do it. Lots of love. We'll see you now before long. Bye-bye.